Okay. Alan Lynch, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So you just published a memoir of yours. It's called Zero to Hero, From Bullied Kid to Warrior. And it's about your experience as a child, but also leading up to your experience in Vietnam, where you received the Medal of Honor. Before we get to that, let's talk about your childhood, because this was I realized it was really interesting, because it's you grew up at a time like right after World War II. So it was an interesting time in American history. What was it like for you as a kid?
Well, my childhood was it was really neat, especially in looking at it from today's point of view, where kids are kind of bubble wrapped. One of my first memories is walking to school, kindergarten, 5 blocks away, crossing a busy street, and 111th Street in Roseville, Illinois, and being able to walk to and from school at 5 years old, playing with my friends, after school until the lights went out, playing games outside. There was no air conditioning. So, all the windows were open. Most mothers didn't have jobs, so they were home. And so there was the kind of the mother underground, so that when me and my friends were out doing stuff, there would always be this feeling of being watched from some window somewhere. So it was really kind of a neat time. And even we moved to a trailer park in Homewood, Eli's Trailer Park. And it was the same thing. Everybody we played, we had fun. We had the run of the trailer park. We even crossed a real busy street. I think it was Lincoln Ave, and went crossed through a graveyard and into a woods into Bumtown one time. That's what we called it back then. And, we had a lot of adventures, a lot of stuff. We moved to Lake Eliza, Indiana, and had the run of the woods. I could, at like 7, 8 years old, I could take a .410 shotgun, go out into the woods and hunt squirrels and rabbit. And, it was a magic time to be a kid. And it was a time when boys could just be boys.
Another huge part of your childhood was your father, who served in the military during World War II. He seemed like he had a big influence on you as a young man.
He did. My dad was one of these guys. He was, of course, raised during the Depression, the real Depression, where they worried about food and heat and clothing and all of this stuff. And I was raised on Depression stories of, kicking coal off of freight cars so they could heat their apartment at night. And, when the electricity was turned off, how they were able to turn it back on. So he was a kind of a fix-it man. We never had a lot of money growing up. So if the house needed repair, we did it. And of course, I, being the boy, was the helper. And my dad gave me that sense of, I can fix anything. I can do anything.
Did your dad serve in World War II?
He never went overseas. He was a dog handler, gave me a love of dogs. And I trained when I was a kid, one of my only friends was my dog, Duke, and I trained him a little bit and taught him a lot of tricks because of, my dad's influence and how to train a dog properly and so on.
So, but when growing up, was there like a military ethos in your family? Like, was there an idea that, if you were a young man, if you were a boy, like you were supposed to serve in the military at some point, or was that not really a thing?
I was woke up to reveille every morning. My dad would come in and whistle reveille. So, and that was at 5:30, religiously. And my dad had this thing of if my dad was up, everyone was up. And of course, being a traditional family back in the 50s, my dad would leave for work about 6:15, 6:30. My mother would get up and cook him breakfast. And of course, I would be up and have breakfast with my dad. And if I had school, I'd get ready for school. When we were out in Indiana, I had chores. So when breakfast was done, my dad went to work. I went out to the garden. I weeded the garden, cut the grass and all that. So there was kind of it wasn't you have to join the military kind of thing, but it was very clear that my dad was in charge. It was very clear that I was expected to do certain things every day. And, listening to my uncles talk about their time in the Navy, my dad's time in the Army Air Corps, there was a real feeling of that was something I was going to have to do in my future.
When you were a young kid, like you grew up in a decidedly working class family, did you have high ambitions as a kid, or was your goal just like get a steady paying job after you graduated high school? What was that like for you?
I had very little ambition. I think what happened was when I was bullied, it kind of just sucked the life right out of me. And all I wanted to do when I was in high school was get out. And I did not want to go to summer school again. I had to go because I failed algebra my freshman year. So I wanted to get through high school being white paint. It's kind of there, it's there, but you don't really recognize it. And so basically it was get out of high school, get a job somewhere and wait to get drafted. And then I decided, well, I'll just enlist.
Well, let's talk about the bullying. You mentioned that because that was a big part of your story. When did that start happening to you when you were a kid?
4th grade. 3 kids came to class. I don't know why they took an instant dislike to me, but they did. And my mother was quite a pacifist. She had me convinced. I don't know what it is with moms, but everything has to do with you can knock out an eye. So, I had this idea that if I hit somebody really hard, the eye would pop out. And it was the idea of, how would you feel if you hurt somebody? How would you feel if you knocked out an eye or hurt somebody like that or whatever? And so I became afraid of hurting somebody. And, when you give fear a place inside of you, it grows like a cancer, and it grew inside of me. And I became afraid not only of hurting, but of getting hurt. Now, the funny thing is as I was getting beat up, my eye wasn't popping out, and my teeth weren't falling out, and my jaw was never broken, and it was hit plenty of times. But it never seemed to register with me that, I should hit back. And so I didn't. And they made my life from 4th grade all the way through 8th grade a living hell.
Did it get better after 8th grade?
We moved to high school. We moved to Dalton, Illinois, and it got a lot better because I was in a different school. But it's kind of one of those things of no matter where you go, there you are. So the kid that was bullied in grade school and junior high was the same kid that went to this brand new high school. And it wasn't long before my cover got pulled. And I confronted a kid. He stood up and I stood down. I just walked away from him right in front of the whole lunchroom. And so I was right back to being that kid again. And though the bullying wasn't as bad, there was enough of it. There was some, of course, every class has its bullies. And they found me and a couple of my friends to pick on. And I ended up having a couple fights in high school. I lost them both, but at least I fought.
And so your mom was the pacifist. What did your dad think about it?
My dad was not happy with me. He wanted me to punch him. His whole thing was when you push back. When somebody pushes you, punch them in the nose. Someone messes with you, you get into a fight, you fight them. Even if you lose and you bloody them, they're going to think twice about fighting you again. So he was not at all happy with me. I kind of think he wasn't very proud of me when I was in grade school and high school and being bullied and all that.
And so I imagine that affected you for a good deal of time, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Bullying takes away your self-image. It destroys it. And a lot of parents don't know, that what they feel about their kids comes through. If I would tell my dad as an example that you weren't very proud of me, he would go, "Oh, I was very proud of you. You were a wonderful kid." But he wasn't. He wasn't because I was the kid that was getting picked on. I was the kid that had few friends. I was the kid that, they kept asking me, why couldn't I be like one of my aunts or my uncles? So it did affect me. It affected me greatly. It just almost destroyed me.
So you spent high school just ready, just getting ready to get out of high school and get out of town. You decided to join the military. Why did you sign up? Was it just to just do something different?
Well, I knew I was going to get drafted. When I graduated in 1964, there was only a couple places you could go. You could go to college or trade school and get a deferment, or you got drafted. That was it. Well, I wasn't interested in anything. I wasn't interested in cars. I wasn't interested in getting my hands dirty. And, I certainly didn't have the grades to go to college. So I knew I was going to get drafted. So I decided I'm going to take control of my life and enlist. So I enlisted in the Army, and I was going to be a personnel specialist. And that didn't work out so well.
Why didn't it work out so well?
They offered me OCS, Officer Candidate School. And so I had to change my MOS, my military occupational specialty, from clerk typist to infantry. And that set me up, of course, to go to OCS, infantry OCS. And then when I got out of that, I went to Germany, and then I volunteered for Vietnam from there.
And what did your parents think when you signed up with the military?
Well, my dad was happy. My mother, not so much. My dad was, I think my dad had this attitude of finally he's going to become a man, because that's what the military does. It will take raw material and make you a man. And my mother, of course, was losing her little boy that, they basically thought that I'd last about 3 seconds in the military. I mean, I'm in a barracks with a bunch of other guys. I've been bullied all my life. How is this going to work out? So they were pretty much afraid. I know my mom was not very happy at all.
And you mentioned, you did OCS, but that didn't really pan out for you. What do you think happened there?
Well, it was another one of those, no matter where you go, there you are. I went through basic training, a leadership school, and advanced infantry training. I was a squad leader in basic and a squad leader in AIT, went through that harassment, but OCS, the harassment is a lot different, and it makes basic training and advanced infantry look relatively easy. And I started thinking that this was a personal thing, that the TAC officers were out to get me personally, which wasn't true. And so basically taking everything so personally, my morale went down, and I was just that kid again. So I did a drop-on request.
And did you feel disappointed in yourself that you did that, or
yeah,
like, oh man, I screwed this up again?
Yeah, it was. Here's another failure. So far, I failed everything except basic and AIT.
So
it was just I was on that track, and it was just, I'm a dud. Right. That's all I am. I'm a dud.
You're a zero. That's the zero part of the story. Well, so you drop OCS, you went to Germany. What were you doing there? Like, did you think that you were going to end up in Vietnam eventually, and you just thought this is going to be my little, I don't know, a respite before that? What was the idea about going to Germany?
I went to Germany. I was just basically sent there, and I thought Germany would just be my last duty station. I'd do my time in Germany, and in 1967, my 3 years would be up, and I'd go home. And that wasn't the case. I didn't like being cold. And in Germany, we did a lot of field training exercises out in the wintertime. And I got frostbite on my feet during one of those training exercises. And I was offered an opportunity to re-enlist. I was offered some money, a change of duty, and I was starting to like the Army. I was really starting to like it. It was there's just something about being a part of a team and being with a bunch of guys that are doing the same thing, and you're learning to trust each other. And so in the back of my mind, I was kind of thinking this might be what I'm going to do the rest of my life. And so I re-enlisted, and I ended up going to Berlin, and I was assigned to a mortar platoon, and not what I wanted to do. And so again, being immature, I copped a bad attitude. I ended up getting 2 Article 15s. Those are non-judicial punishments. My first one was because I smarted off to my section sergeant and told him exactly, in no uncertain terms, what I thought of him. And that cost me a 15-day confined to the barracks, 15 days of extra duty, 7 days pay, and a suspended bus to private E3. And then I got a second Article 15 for going AWOL to help a buddy that got some rather bad news from home. And it was right about that time that Vietnam was really starting to heat up, and a lot of my friends were getting levied for Vietnam and all of that. I still had that stink of cowardice on me. I really needed to prove myself to myself. I'd come a long way. I was doing a lot of things. For the first time in my life, I had pretty good friends. But I just really felt the need to test myself. And Vietnam was the event of my generation. So I volunteered.
You volunteered? You didn't get drafted for it. You didn't get sent there.
No. I volunteered for the 1st Cavalry Division when I got everything I wanted. I wanted infantry, I wanted the 1st Cav, and I got all of it in spades.
I mean, what did you know about Vietnam before you signed up?
Not a lot. I mean, I knew I was really good at geography. In fact, that was the only class I did well on in high school, so I knew where it was. A lot of my friends were getting drafted. When I was in OCS, the 1st Cavalry was deployed. By the time I had gotten to Germany, the Battle of the Ai Drang had already been fought. Vietnam was now becoming a major engagement. It was a war. There were levies coming down all the time. People that had time in service and all that to spend a year in Vietnam being levied for it. And I just needed to be a part of it.
So you got sent to Vietnam. Where did you serve there?
Central Highlands. It was a place called Binh Dinh Province. It was the Rice Bowl of Vietnam.
And what was your role? You took on several roles while you were there, right?
Yeah, I started off carrying a what they called an XM79. It was an experimental model. It was an M16 with an M79 grenade launcher underneath. Now it's called the M203 grenade launcher. It's the same thing, but I carried that. And then I realized that was a real heavy load to carry. I carried 35 rounds of HE, some white phosphorus, Willie Peter, some shotgun rounds, smoke. And then I carried 35 magazines for the M16. I didn't want to run out of ammunition. After about a month and a half of carrying that, I was able to get rid of it and just go to an M16. For the first several months, I was nothing more. I was a grunt. I was just a Spec 4, part of a squad. Then in November, late November, I got the opportunity to become a radio telephone operator, an RTO.
What year? This was 1967?
1967.
1967. So you got there, you were there for, how long were you there in Vietnam?
I got there May 31st, 1967. I left June 1st, 1968.
And I mean, what were the conditions like when because sometimes you described Vietnam as sounded kind of nice, right? You had these like pristine beaches and there's coconuts, but then sounded terrible at the same time.
Yeah, it was a paradox. In 1967, we were still out to win the war. At least that's what we thought. I wasn't there. I think it was about a month, and the Vietnamese had their national elections. We were pulled out of the field and back to LZ English. So a lot of us thought that we were actually seeing an American democracy, forming right before our eyes, and we were like the French during the American, War of Independence. We were there to help. Little did we know, and I didn't discover this till I started studying Vietnam years later, that the Vietnam election was rigged. That it was basically a war that President Johnson had no intention of really winning. He didn't have the stones to go in and actually, fight to win. So he was basically wasting us. But we didn't know that in 67. We controlled our area of operation, the Bong Song Plain. We had a lot of contact, but we won every battle. It was, we were overpowering the enemy all the time. We were fighting both the NVA, North Vietnamese Army, and the Viet Cong. And we basically, I wrote home, I remember to my mom and dad that we owned the area. We did our ambushes and all of that stuff that you do. But they would run from us because we had such tremendous support.
And you talk about a situation where you started making some good friends during Vietnam. You made one really good friend, but you lost him quickly. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. His name was Jerry Bryans, and we came in country together. Jerry was one of those guys that if we were down on our luck, if we, had no C rations or we were running out of cigarettes and he had one, he'd share it. He was just a good guy, real nice guy. And when he was from Schulzburg, Wisconsin, and he told the story of how he was a kid. He was out farming. He was a farmer. He was out on his tractor, and lightning struck him and almost killed him. Ended up in the hospital, and then I guess a year later or so, he got kicked in the head by a horse. Ended up back in the hospital, and he almost died twice. And he said, 3 strikes and you're out. He says, I know if something happens here, I'll probably not survive it. But he would say it and tell it in such a funny way, would just have us in stitches. And he, of course, with every story, he added a little bit to it. Well, we were we were up in Kon Tum province, and we were in an area that looked a lot like Wisconsin. And we had lunch together. We were talking about, going fishing when we got back to the world and all that. And we started to move down the trail. Our point man just hadn't gone probably 50 meters. And our point men came back and signaled that there was movement, and the LT went running up, and Jerry got behind a tree. I got behind a stump, and this guy, I think I call him Fred in the book, got behind a bush. He was our M60 machine gunner. Our real gunner was on R&R, and so he had been newly assigned. I think he came in with us or shortly after us, but he had a real bad attitude. He was kind of a kid from New York, real smart mouth. We didn't know how lazy he was until the machine gun jammed, but the lieutenant came running back, and he, called ceasefire, ceasefire, ceasefire. They're friendly. Unbeknownst to us, the special forces were running with some mountaineers in the area. We call them CIDG, Civilian and Indigenous Personnel. So after yelling ceasefire 3 times, Jerry and I stood up, and Fred shot him in the chest with the machine gun, which immediately jammed because it was so dirty. Jerry went down like a stone. He ended up dying on the helicopter, the medevac that came in. They didn't tell me that for a few days because I threatened to kill him if Jerry died. So they gave it time to cool down. And then over the course of a few days, a lot of my friends came up and talked about what a great guy Jerry was and all of that. And, how sad it would be that if, something happened to Jerry, I think everybody knew but me, that, 3 families would be destroyed. The guy that Jerry's family, my family, and the guy that shot him. When I found out Jerry was dead, I forget who it was, probably saved me, came up and had a nice chat with me because I was by myself having a cigarette. And he said, Fred's going to have to live with the fact that he killed one of our own. And that kind of hit me. And so I didn't do anything. And I told him I wasn't going to do anything. But he was ostracized. We didn't accept him too easily back into the fold. He earned his way back in. And when I left Vietnam, he had made sergeant, and I think he was a squad leader. I'd like to think that he lived a good life in replacement for the life he took. That's what I'm hoping.
And how did that moment influence the rest of your experience in Vietnam?
I didn't make a lot of friends after that. I had a lot of acquaintances. I was friendly, but I never got close to anybody. I have a hard time getting close to people. It's very difficult to do that. It seems it affected me in a way that, you make friends with someone and they get killed, they die. And that was that's taken me a lot of years to deal with. The thing is, now I know that I have the issue, so I try real hard to, be a little bit more friendly than probably I normally would. But still, it's difficult to do it.
So for most of your life, you've been this zero kid that got bullied, no ambition, smarted off to superiors, would get busted down back to private first class. But then you had this moment where you had the decision to go from a zero to hero. And this is the situation where it eventually earned you the Medal of Honor. Can you walk us through that scenario?
Sure. We had been up in Dak To, and I think about the middle of November, we got taken back to join the Battle of Tam Quan. And for my part, I was now an RTO, radio telephone operator, and carried a Perk 25 on my back, along with a basic load of ammunition and all that. But I was kind of like my LT's shadow. And I got, the day of the incident, the day of the action, we got a brand new lieutenant, Lieutenant Donald Sutherland. Very courageous guy. I only knew him for like 4 hours. But what I found out, what I did know until I started writing the book, is that he pretty much demanded to go out with the unit the day we air assaulted in. He talked to our captain, Captain Orsini, and he said, look, I want to go. I want to do this. I want to be a part of this. Give me the platoon. So he got second platoon. I became his RTO and his shadow. And it was right after we had, a break for noon chow. And we started moving in to relieve A Company and hit the enemy from the side, from the flank. And we walked into an ambush. It was like a 3-sided box. We walked right into the middle of it, and all hell broke loose. And the lieutenant ran up me along with him to the front to see what was happening. About that time, we were taking fire, sending, traffic back to, our company commander, letting them know what was going on. And we were taking fire from our flank and so on. Wilhelm, who was walking, one of the point men, came running back, got shot about halfway to us. I went out and I got him. And I think a medic came out, as I recall, to help us out. And we got him back to our lines. And he said that Casares had gotten shot in both shins and couldn't walk, couldn't move. So I asked the LT if I could drop my radio and go out and get him, which I went out there with the intention of getting him and coming back and getting a medevac. Well, that wasn't the case. As soon as I got in the ditch and started doing what I had to do, all hell broke loose again. A lot of fire came down. And just as I thought, well, I'm going to put him on my back and then I'm going to carry him out, Joe Esparza came running across and got shot pretty far from us, but close enough to me so I could get him. So I ran out and I got him back in the ditch. And there we stayed. Unbeknownst to me at the time, our company had pulled back because they had taken such heavy fire. And they led one rescue mission to try to get to us. During that rescue mission, Lieutenant Sutherland got shot in the head and died. Another guy got wounded, so they pulled back again. They tried another time to get to us. And again, that didn't work. Then finally, an APC, armored personnel carrier, was sent over. They were going to back it up to our position, drop the back ramp, and then we could load in and go away. We saw the APC pull up to us, lower its ramp, and then it got hit with an RPG. And it was like, are you kidding me? We were literally feet away from being rescued. And when the RPG hit the track, my captain, Orsini, was blown out of the turret, the commander's hatch, and ended up being severely wounded. So they pulled back, and that was the last time they tried to get to us. They then called in continuous artillery and airstrikes. And that went on for a long time. In the meantime, we were, killing a lot of Viet Cong and NVA and whoever was coming within, place where we could get them. And then it got really quiet. And so I thought it was time now to see what we could do. So I went up and I made sure there was no VC working in the area. And when I realized it was safe and had checked a couple of hooches and some things, I moved, I think, Casares first and got him to a place. Then I went back and I got Esparza and moved him to an area. And then I was going to just start, doing a little bit of concentric, trying to find our guys. And I didn't go maybe 100 meters, and there they were, and they called to me. We went back and got the wounded, and we all got medevac together.
So how long were you guys pinned down?
The citation and some of the stuff had like 2 hours. I think we were there for about 4. It was right after chow when we got in, and it was dark when we got out. So we were there a long time.
Yeah. And it sounds like you weren't even like really thinking about like there wasn't like a point of sitting. Did you just decide that there's some guys out there that need my help? I'm going to go out there and do it. Like, what was going through your mind? Is that what you were just thinking? I got to go help my buddies.
Yeah. You're trained in basic and in AIT, and it's the warrior ethos that you never leave your wounded. But I've been asked this question a lot, and over the years, as I've gotten a lot older, I've become more reflective. And I think the reason that I did what I did was because of the upbringing that I had. My mother and dad, my grandfather and grandmother, my whole family were made up of people who knew how to sacrifice, not only for their family. My dad sometimes worked 3 jobs, because he didn't think my mother should have to work. She had a tough enough job raising my sister and I. My grandmother and grandfather used to take food and clothing to poor people, back in the 50s and early 60s. My mother often took in laundry and prepared meals for people in the neighborhood and such that were sick. So this was how I was raised. And then you have your drill sergeants that tell you don't leave your wounded. They, and they inspire you to, that's what we don't do. And they do that by, if you fall out on a run, if you let somebody fall out on a run or, during PT and you don't help them out, then you do a lot more. So there's kind of that negative reinforcement. So I think when that happened, there was no time to think or to act. There was no time to think. You just had to do what I had to do.
And after you did it, did you were you thinking like, wow, that was a pretty crazy thing that I went through? Like that's something that worthy of the Medal of Honor. Were you just like, oh, I just got to go on. That was just part of my job. Now on to the next thing.
That's it. I really don't believe at this point that I deserve the Medal of Honor. I was put in for it by my peers. I've always felt that as a result of that, getting that medal, that I owed something and I had to give something back, which is why I devoted my life to veterans. But, I look at people that did so much more than me that, got a Bronze Star or a Distinguished Service Cross or a Silver Star. And I go, how did I get this? And, it's kind of, even when I was going through a lot of stuff, the one thing in the back of my mind was that I had to now earn it. There's a scene in Saving Private Ryan where Tom Hanks, as the captain, is shot, and Private Ryan runs up to him and he looks at him and he says, "Earn this." And that's kind of how I felt.
So yeah, that changed your life. And as you said, like you spent the rest of your life really trying to earn that. So talk about how did you go about earning your Medal of Honor in your mind?
Well, I started as a veterans benefits counselor at a VA hospital and worked with returning Vietnam veterans. I had ended up doing a couple things there. I worked in a drug unit. Some of our guys in the 70s were coming back hooked on various drugs, and so I did that. The more I got into veterans benefits work, I became a veterans benefits counselor, and I started filing claims for veterans and helping them with appeals, and I really started to like that. Then I became chief ambulatory care at the North Chicago, now the Level Federal Medical Center. And I really worked hard to make sure that veterans got what they deserved. But the biggest thing was when I became a member of the executive director of the Vietnam Veterans Leadership Program and started working with my brother veterans and getting them jobs and helping them to, get through the big unemployment that we had back just in the 70s and 80s. And then the best thing, and something that I turned out to be really exceptional at, was as a Vietnam Veterans of America service officer, and I did that through the Illinois Attorney General's office. They only let me work appeals, and a lawyer taught me how to write legally, and she was really good with the red pen. And my caseload was nothing but VA appeals. I didn't cherry pick. I worked really hard to get the hardest cases I could find, and I won most of them. And I made millions of dollars for veterans in compensation. I worked in the first attorney general I worked for, Neil Hartigan, and we went to Washington and lobbied for judicial review of VA claims with Vietnam Veterans of America. And so I'm very, very proud of that. And then after I retired in 2005, we formed the Lynch Foundation to help veterans of our current war that were coming home, that were falling through the cracks. And now our program is now part of Operation Support Our Troops America, which we now have care packages we send overseas. We work with Gold Star families in what we call Leap of Faith. And then we have the Lynch program that helps veterans with having financial difficulty.
So yeah, you've been doing a lot to turn that medal in your mind and helping your fellow veterans. But you also talk about in the book, like while you were helping veterans with different problems, not only financial, career, drug problems, but you're helping them with their problems with PTSD and those emotional problems of trying to figure out, sort of go through the stuff that they went through psychologically during the war. But you yourself started experiencing PTSD during this. When did that start happening and how did it manifest itself?
1973 was the summer of 1973. It was the first time that I ever had a dive on the floor startle reaction. It was hot. I had just got off the bus from work. I was walking home about 3 blocks. I was soaking wet when I got home. It was hot. It was humid. Got into the house and got into some dry clothes. I sat down to dinner. There was a flash of lightning and the roll of thunder, and I was on the floor. And my wife said that I got a strange look in my face and ended up on the floor, and started with a bad startle reaction. Sudden noises would just, make me duck. And sometimes I was at one event where they fired a Civil War cannon. I ended up in my suit, diving on into the mud. But then I had started having intrusive thoughts and anger and, vivid thoughts of Vietnam. A smell would set me off, heat, different things, smells, a few nightmares, suicidal ideation, the whole 9 yards. And it came in waves. I would have times when it would be fine, and I would have a normal month, years, of not much happening. And then something would set me off, and I'd get very depressed and angry and reclusive and drink way too much, and, all the negative stuff.
And when did you start, realize that you got to do something about this? At what point?
It was in the early 90s. I had been doing a lot of work with veterans, filing a lot of claims. And what would happen is I would read the medical records on some of the appeals that I would be fighting. And that would bring back even more vivid memories, because you're reading about somebody that was in combat, and I would go, my gosh, this is exactly what I did. This is where I was. This is what I went through. And so that would trigger memories. So eventually I realized I needed to get help, and things were not going good at home. And I was I was a jerk. I could put that in a lot stronger terms, but I won't. And it was made very clear to me that I needed to get some help. So I went to the Evanston Vet Center in Chicago. I started seeing Betsy Tolsted, who was the psychologist there. She wanted to put me on medication, and I told her no. I had worked in a VA hospital. I saw what the VA does with medications. So I said, no, you either fix me, give me the tools. I'll work hard. I'll do everything you say. I'm in it to win it. I'm not here to play games. I said, but I'm not going on medication. So we worked. And the first time I saw her was for couple of years, I think 2-3 years. And she helped me out. She actually gave me my first good Christmas since Vietnam. I used to go into a deep depression around Thanksgiving, and it wouldn't end until March, April, sometimes longer. And in therapy, we talked about, some of the things that were really bothering me. And one was the death of my buddy, Jerry. And she gave me an assignment to find his grave and to film it. So I went out and I bought a little camera, a little movie camera. And I went out and I found his grave, which took me the better part of a day. I finally found out where he was buried. And I filmed that. I talked to him, told him what was going on in my life and all of that, left my business card on his gravestone, and came home. And in the meantime, my wife had cooked dinner, and beef stroganoff was and is her go-to dish. She's really good at cooking it. Each of my kids told me what mattered most to them, and then I told them about Jerry. My youngest son, Brian, was named after him. I didn't know, in the Army, we go by last name, so all I knew by was Brian's. So my last son's name is Brian. And he was named after, and I explained why, and I told him about Jerry. And it was like I had the best Christmas.
Yeah, I mean, you were able to start treating that wound that you had.
Yeah.
And is it still ongoing?
Yeah. I'm able to handle it a lot better. But it's obviously it's kind of raw still.
No, of course. One thing that struck me, something you wrote about, and we've talked about it too on this podcast, this sort of ethos that you grew up with thanks to your parents, your mom, your dad, grandparents, and something that's helped you a lot, this idea, and I love this mantra, it's others, not self. How has that helped you? Not only, that's kind of what helped made you do the thing that you got the citation for the Medal of Honor, but it seems like it's the thing that's been therapeutic for you after the war. It's this idea of others, not self.
Yeah. It actually saved my life. I was on a very bad path, and it was it's one of those, it's like a guy drowning in knee deep water. It was right there, right in front of me, my whole life. And I didn't see it. What PTSD does to us is it forces us to dwell in upon ourselves. We become almost like like an emotional black hole. And I can tell you the way my friends and I talked about it, it was my PTSD won't let me. My PTSD, we own it. I had nightmares last night. My intrusive thoughts, my this, my that. And it's all about you. It's all about me. It's all about what I'm going through. Well, at the worst possible time in my life, I had to focus on somebody else and not me. My dad got terminal lung cancer and spent a year dying. And so for that year, it was, at the end of the workday, go to the hospital. During the weekend, go down and give my mom a break because she was taking care of him. And my sister was, just a few doors down, but they were both being run ragged by him because he was having so many issues and so many problems with the lung cancer. And so I would go there on the weekends and stay overnight. Sometimes I'd go there, take a day off work and go on a Wednesday and come home on a Thursday. So I was totally focused on my dad. My symptoms didn't go away, but they just lessened to where they were just very manageable. A couple of years later, after my dad passed, my mother suffered a massive stroke and I ended up going to the nursing home to see her. When she was close, I would go sometimes during the week, and every weekend I would go see her. And again, I was concentrating on my mom. I was concentrating on seeing her. The symptoms mitigated and became a lot less. And by accident, it kind of hit me. When I was taking care of my parents, I wasn't having a lot of symptoms going on. So, and again, it's kind of one of these serendipity things. I was at a Rotary. I think I was given a talk there. And one of their things is not self, others, or others, not self, something like that. Well, I couldn't remember exactly what it was. So I thought, that's it. That's the key. If I focus on the needs of other people and I put them first, then my situation, my PTSD is no longer the total focus of my life. It's other people. And so I put that on my challenge coin, others, not self. And I put that in my pocket. So when I start getting into that pity poor me mode and, my PTSD, and I even try now not to use any ownership of it. I view it almost as, I do view it as the enemy. It's like the Viet Cong. It's like the NVA, and I'll be damned if it's going to win. So I fight it like that. That's why I do what I do with the foundation and do other things. And the first person I put first was my wife and my kids and my grandkids.
No, I love that mantra, others, not self, because I've seen that in my own life. I don't have PTSD, but whenever I get down on myself and feeling down, as soon as I shift my focus away from myself, and focus on others, it just goes away, and it's amazing what that can do. Yeah.
I tell you, I've been a lot of veteran friends that I have. I let them know for me, that was the key. It may not work for them, but for me, that's the big key.
Well, Alan, this has been a great conversation. Is there some place people can go to learn more about the book, Zero to Hero?
I know they sell it on Amazon. I've heard some people have found it at Borders. I know it's on Amazon.
And where can people go to learn more about your foundations?
They can go to Operation Support Our Troops America. They can Google that or just go OSOT-America. Just type it into their search engine, and that'll tell you all about what we do.
Well, fantastic. Alan Lynch, thanks so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
My guest today was Alan Lynch. He's the author of the book Zero to Hero. It's available on Amazon.com and bookstores everywhere. You can also find out more information about his Veterans Foundation at ajlynchfoundation.org. Also, check out our show notes at aom.is/0tohero, where you can find links to resources where you can delve deeper into this topic.